Hi everyone and welcome to a new video on the CBI channel. In this tutorial series we're focusing on theming inside of our Django and React application with the help of themes from Material UI. This is not the first video in this series, in fact we've already done 4 before, in which we focused on adding a custom theme in our React.js frontend. I showed you how you can switch between a light and a dark theme using a switch component. We've created a theme picker, which enabled us to switch between themes using a select form. And in the last video, we even managed to store themes inside of our Django backend database and change the theme when we change that in our frontend. Now, in this fifth and final video of this series, we're going to enable users to create their own themes inside of the application with the use of a color picker. And in the end, it will look something like this, where a user can give a theme a name and use the color picker to select different colors for the primary and the secondary color. And then once that theme is saved, the user can pick that theme in the settings and immediately that theme will then be applied. Now, to realize this, we're going to be following 6 steps. We're going to start by adding some backend functionality inside of our application so that we can create themes. Then we're going to be installing React color because that is going to help us with using forms that have a color picker. We're going to make a new page for creating themes and add some forms and color pickers on our project. Then we're going to add some logic so that we can submit those themes to our backend and also that we can query them on our homepage so we know exactly which themes are available. And as a last step, we're going to make sure that we can also edit our themes. So the first step is making sure that in our Django backend, we can actually create different themes. Now we're now inside of our code and you can see that we're using the themes view set to create the themes inside of our application. Now currently we only have a function for listing all of those themes, whereas the active theme view set also has the ability to create themes. So what we now want to do is we want to make sure that with this themes view set, we can also create new themes. So to do that is actually really simple because we can just copy over this part that we did in the previous video for creating the themes. And then we paste that in the themes view set so that we also have the create function for the themes.objects.all. Now, actually, this is quite basic because we don't really need to make any changes here because by default, this should work for us. So what we can now do is we can save this and open a new terminal. And in there, we can cd into our backend. We do venv/scripts/activate to activate our virtual environment. And now let's start the server with python manage.py run server. And then we can do a quick check to see if we can actually create records now. So we're now inside of our backend API, and you can see that we have one for creating the active theme, but we're interested in the one for themes. And we now see that we have an actual form where we're able to provide a name, a mode, a primary color, and a secondary color. And those ones will then be stored inside of our database in this particular structure. Now, this structure is important because later on when we want to submit data from our frontend to our backend using an API, we want to get the data in this exact structure right here so that our backend can receive it. So now that we can create different themes inside of our backend, let's make sure that our frontend is actually ready to submit that data to the backend. And one of the first things that we need to do for that is make an install, because we're going to be using React Color to get a color picker inside of our project, which should enable users to select a color based on a picker like this. Now, to use this inside of our project is actually really simple. In here, in getting started, you can see that we can do the install with npm install react color. So let's do that right now. So inside of our project, we're going to be opening a new terminal. And this time we will cd into our frontend because we're going to be doing some work there. And then we do npm install react color. And our install is now complete. Now we want to be creating these themes from our frontend. So let's start by creating a new page, specifically for creating new themes. So I'm going to go to the About page, and I'm just going to copy over and paste the about.jsx file. And we're going to be calling this create themes.jsx. And also the constant inside of this file, I'm going to be calling create theme. And let's also export default create theme. And we can say we will be creating themes on this page. And let's save that. Now we also need to go to our app.jsx file because in here I want to import this new page. So we're going to be importing create themes. And then on the bottom, we can add a new path for creating themes. So let's copy over the root from home. And we're going to give this the element of create theme. And then the URL is going to be equal to create. And let's save that. And now one last thing what I want to do is I want to go to my navigation menu and actually make some changes right there so that we have a link to the create page. Now in this case, I'm just going to make a change because I no longer want our about page. So I'm just going to call this create theme. And then we can make sure that the URL is equal to /create. And now our about page is the create page. Now let's see what that looks like by doing npm run dev to start our front-end server. And let's take a look if we now see a create page. Okay, so we are now on our front end and you can see that the home page is still alright. And if we go to the create theme page, you can see that we will be creating themes on this page. So this seems to be working just fine. Now, previously we discussed that to create these themes, we need to provide information for name, mode, primary color, and secondary color. So what I want to do on my front end is I want to create forms for all of these 4 fields. So I want to have a text field for the name. I want to have a select field for the mode, which has the option of either light or dark. And then I want to have the 2 color pickers for the primary color and the secondary color. So let's make sure that we have some forms on this page. Now we're going to be getting our forms from our Material UI components library. So we're going to go to the documentation, and in the components, we're first going to start looking for a text field, which we can use to get the name. Now on the top here, they have a few examples for basic text fields, and that is more than enough for our use case. So what I will do is I'm going to copy over the text field from Material UI and put that import in our create themes.jsx file. And then we can also copy over the example that we would like to use. And in this case, I want to have just the standard. So I'm going to copy over the last example because that's the one we have right there. And then inside of our create theme, we can get rid of this text and we can just have the text field. And let's fix the indentation on the text field so that we have the information underneath each other. And let's save this. And now we should see a form on our create theme page. And indeed, we now have the form right here. Now I do think it is a little bit small, so let's change the width a little bit. So we can go to the create theme page, and in the form we can add sx, an equal sign, and then 2 times the square brackets. And then there we can do some styling by saying that the width needs to be equal to 33%. And let's save that. And now we can see that the form is a little bit wider. And in here we can later on provide the name of the form. Now, of course, what we want to achieve is that every time we type in something, we get the value of this form and we want to send that to the backend. But that means that we need to develop some logic that is going to pass the value of the form to a constant that we have on our page. Now, that is actually quite easy to arrange for us. So on the top of the create theme.jsx file, we're going to be importing useState, because that is something that we can use to track the state of the form. And then we're going to be creating a new constant, and we're going to be calling this name. And then to change the name, we want to use a function called setName. And we're going to set that equal to useState. And then by default, it is going to be empty. Now, what we want to achieve is that every time a change is being made to our text field, it's going to write the value of the text field to this constant called name using the setName function, so that we always have the latest value present inside of this constant, and that later on when we submit the data, we can refer to name, which holds the value. So to make sure that the text field is going to bring the value of the form to this name, we can create a new constant. So this constant is going to be called handle name value. And this is going to be equal to some round brackets, and in there we define the word event. And then we do an arrow function with some square brackets. And now we need to define what needs to happen whenever this constant is triggered. Now what we want to do is we want to get the value from the text field and use setName to write it to name. So we can say that we want to set name, and we want to change the value of name using setName by referring to event.target.value. And that will take the value of the form and it will put it in name. Now we also need to make sure that that constant is being triggered whenever the form value changes. So what we can now do in this text field is set the value of the form always equal to name. So now we make sure that it's always taking a look at this constant of name to get the correct value of the form. And we can also say that whenever we make a change inside of the text field, we want to trigger this handle name value. So we can do on change, and we can make that equal to the handle name value. So every time we type something inside of our form, it will change the value here, and that will then show it because the value is also set to name. So let's see how this actually works by doing a console.log, and we're going to be tracking the value of the name field, and we want to constantly log the name constant. So if we now go to our front end and we do inspect and then we go to the console, you can see that every time I type, I put in an A, it shows the updated value inside of the console. So this seems to be working just fine because the value inside of the form is correct, but also every time we change it, the value is also changing. Okay, so one thing we can also change is make sure that the label here is not standard, but we want to call this name. Now we also need a form for the mode. And for mode, we want to enable the user to pick between either dark or light. So we need a select field. So we can go back to the Material UI documentation and go to select. And in here we can pick one of the examples. So on this page we can scroll down a little bit, and at a certain moment we will get some examples, just like here where we have one for age which has multiple options. So the first thing we're going to be doing here is copying over the import for form control and select, and then pasting that inside of our create themes.jsx file, because we need those two to make it work. Then we can go over and check where the first example for age occurs, and you can see that it is right here under the form control, and then we can copy it over all the way until that block ends. And let's also put that beneath the text field right here. And also fix those indentations. Now, similarly as before, and what we can also see in the example, is that it again sets a constant of age and set age, and also has a handle change, which does exactly the same thing as what we defined before for our text fields. So what we will do is we can go and copy over the constant of name and set name, and now we do the same thing, but we're going to be creating it for mode, because that's the name of the field, and then set mode. And again, it's going to be equal to nothing. And then we can also copy over the constant of handling the value change, and we can change this to handle mode value, and we can change set name to set mode. Now we then also need to make sure that the value inside of this form is being set not to age, but to mode. And the on change does not need to be handle change, but handle mode value. Now we can also change the title of our form, because in here it's called age and it's also here called age. So we're going to be calling this mode, and also the label is going to be mode. And the different options right here, we have one for none, and then we have 10, 20, and 30. So I'm going to delete the option for none and also for 30. And the only options that I want to give them is have the option of light and the option of dark. Now the value, that is also going to be text, but it's going to be lowercase light and lowercase dark, because those are also the values that we need to pass in to the themes. Now we're also going to put a key here, because Material UI likes to have a unique key for each of the menu items. So we're going to do a key of 1 for the first one and a key of 2 of the second one. Now let's see what that will look like inside of our frontend. And we actually get an error because input label is not defined. And indeed, when we go here, they also use an import of input label inside of the example. So we're going to go back to our create theme and then also paste in the input label. And actually the same goes for the menu item. So also there we need to copy it over and put it in the create themes.jsx file. And now we see the right content. Now again here we see that mode is quite small and it shows the different options. So let's see how we can make this appear in the same way as the name. So inside of the form control, we see that there's already some styling being applied where it has a margin of 1 and a minimum width of 120. So I'm going to get rid of the margin of 1. And now we can see that the forms are on the same level. Then I'm going to be adding a margin left because I don't want the forms to be exactly next to each other. And we're going to do just 20 pixels there. And we're also going to set a width, and that width is going to be the same as it is for our first form, which is going to be 33%. So around 1/3 of what the total screen is. And now you can see that the forms are aligned nicely. And also here we will see whenever we actually console.log and we say mode, and then we set the value to mode as well, we can see what happens whenever we change the form. So we're going to go to inspect and then the console. And whenever I change mode to dark, you can see that dark is appearing as the value. And when we do light, light is appearing as the value. So now we have the name and the mode, but we also need the color pickers to set the primary and the secondary colors that we expect inside of our backend. So let's go to React Color, and in here you can see that we can simply pick a few components and show them on the page. Now if you go to the top, you can see there are different variations of what React Color offers. So this one is called Chrome, but we also have options for Sketch, Photoshop, GitHub, Alpha, Vue. There are a lot of different options you can pick. Now I want to have this one, which is called Sketch, and it enables us to set a few default colors, but also to go around and pick whatever we would like. So if we go down of the example a little bit, you can see that the thing that we need is probably the sketch picker. So I'm going to be importing the sketch picker from React Color. And inside of our create theme page, we're going to paste that in. And I'm just going to put in that block straight away to see what this looks like. And now you can see that we have the exact sketch picker that we just saw on the website inside of our application. And this actually already looks quite cool. Okay, so now we have this sketch picker inside of our application, but we still need to make sure that we can use an onChange and have a value so that we can get the value from the color picker and use it later on to submit the data. Now if we go to the documentation of React Color and we scroll down a little bit, you can see that we can use onChange similarly as before to make sure that we manipulate the value of a constant. So over here, it uses the onChange and then it calls this.handleChange. So we're going to be implementing a very similar thing as what we did with the other forms. So on the top, we're going to be creating a new constant, and this constant is going to be called primary color. And then it is going to be manipulated through the set primary color, like this. Then we're also going to be creating a constant, which is going to be called handle primary color value. And in this case, it's not going to be event, but if we take a look at the example, it actually uses color to access the color of the color picker. So what we will do is we will change this to color, and then we're going to set the primary color to a value. But it's not going to be event the targeted value. But actually, if we take a look at the documentation, we need to get this one, which is hex. Because we want to get this color coding format, because we've also used that in the previous videos inside of our theme. Now, if we scroll up a little bit, you can see that we can access that by using color.hex. So what we can do is set the primary color to something called color.hex. hex. Now, when we can go to our sketch picker, we also need to make sure that whenever something is changed, it changes the value. So we can set the onChange and equal to handle primary color value, which is the function that we've just created. And then next to the onChange, we also need to set the color equal to the value of the primary color, because that is where the most recent value is then stored. And if we don't do this, the actual color in the picker will not really change. So now let's change the console.log to the primary color and also change the value that we see to primary color so that we can see what happens if we change the color picker. So when we now inspect inside of the front end and we go to the console and we change the color, you can see that it constantly changes the color code based on our selection. So this seems to be working just fine. Now, one thing that you need to be wary about, that this obviously causes a lot of re-renders because you can already see there are a lot of different things being rendered inside of our log. Now, to prevent this, you can pick another function, which is onChangeComplete, which actually only processes a change whenever you are done with selecting the color, so that it doesn't run all of the stuff in between. Now, in my case, this is completely fine, so I'm just going to keep it like this, but keep that in mind. Now, also know that if you scroll down on the documentation, you can change all different kinds of things. So, for example, you can set the preset colors to a list of different colors, and by doing that, you can change the colors that are visible by default. So there are a lot of different options to customize your color picker, but for us, this will work just fine. Now, one small concern is that we currently don't really see if this is the primary color that we're setting or the secondary color. So what we will do is on the create themes, we're going to be importing something called box from Material UI. And then we're going to place our color picker in a box so that we can then do some stuff to make it appear a little bit more clear. So we have a box right here and we're going to put in the sketch picker inside of that box. And we're going to give the box the same styling elements as what we did as our form control or our text fields. So I'm going to copy this over to make sure that it has the width of 33%. But I'm also going to set it to a margin top of 30 pixels like this, so that they are a little bit further apart. And now you can see that it's indeed a little bit more down. And let's even change that further to a 50 so that it's a little bit more spaced out. That looks better to me. And now what we want to do is next to the sketch picker, I would actually also like to have a title inside of the box. What we can do if we go here is here it uses an input label. So I'm just going to copy over that input label and put that inside of my box. And we're going to be calling this primary color. And now you can see that below our form, we have the primary color tag in the same format as the other forms are. So this looks just a little bit better. So we also need one for the secondary color. And that's really convenient because we can just copy over this entire box and put it right there. And then we say that the title is going to be secondary color. But now we also need to add a new constant, and that constant is going to be called then secondary color. And then also the set is going to be set secondary color. And we also need to have a new handle change, which is going to be the handle secondary color value. And then we also need to make sure that it doesn't change the primary color, but sets our secondary color. And we can set the color of our second color picker to the secondary color. And of course, we also need to change the onChange to the handle secondary color value. Otherwise, it will mess with the other form. So if we now go to our front end, you can see that we independently can do the primary color and the secondary color. And although the styling of this could have been a little bit better by placing them side to side or whatever, that's really not the purpose of this video. So for now, that is completely fine. Now what we want to do is that whenever we input some information, we can send that to our backend and store it there. So we can actually copy over a piece of code from our previous video, which submits data to our backend. So if you remember correctly, when we go to the settings.jsx file, we put in a constant right here for the submission of the data. And we're going to be doing the same thing right now, but then for creating a theme. So let's copy over the constant of the submission, just so we already have the basis there. And we're going to go to our create themes.jsx file, and I'm just going to paste it underneath the constant of handling the secondary value. Now this constant of submission is going to take a look at all of the data that we have and submit it to the location where it needs to go. And in there, I put in quite a lot of stuff with if statements because that was needed. But what I will do is remove everything from the else statement because we don't really need to do some conditional stuff here. And we're also gonna remove the if statement in the first place because all we want to have is the Axios instance.post because that is going to post the data to our backend. Now, of course, to use Axios instance, we need to import that. So we're going to be importing Axios instance from Axios. And now we can use that right here. And now we also need to slightly change the logic for submitting this, because right now we're posting it to the active theme, but it actually needs to go to themes. So let's put that inside of the post so that we go to the right URL. And back then we were just posting the theme, but if we go here, it actually expects a name, a mode, a primary color, and a secondary color, also written exactly like that. So let's make sure that that is also there. So the first thing that it expects is name, and the value of name is going to be equal to the name constant. So we can say that this is going to be name. Then it expects a mode, which is going to be equal to the value of mode. It expects a primary underscore color, which is going to be equal to our primary color. And it also expects a secondary underscore color, and that is going to be equal to the secondary color. So now we have what we want to submit. Now after we've submitted this, we want to go somewhere, and in this case it just reloads the window, but we want to go to a different page. Now I actually want to go to the home page whenever we have submitted something. So what we will do is change this to window.location.href, and in there we need to specify where we want to go. And we can say that we want to go to something called just a slash. Because if we go to our app.jsx file, you can see that that is where our homepage is located. And let's save this. Now, of course, we want to trigger this submission. And we also saw that in our previous video, when we go to the settings page, is that we need to wrap it around a form. And then we can say that an onSubmit is going to trigger the submission. And the onSubmit is going to be triggered by the button. So what we need to do first is let's wrap the entirety of the code in the form tag. So what we can do is go to create themes.jsx, and we're going to be wrapping the entire form section around this, which is a form where we say that onSubmit is equal to submission, because that is the function that is going to post it and go to the homepage. Then we can take the closing form and move it all the way down so that everything is enclosed by this form. And then we also need to import a button from Material UI. So we can say import and then button from m@ui/material. And then we can use a button on the very bottom of this page. And we can say that the text is submit theme. And then what I want to do as well is I want to set the type equal to submit. And we're going to set the variant equal to contained. Now the variant equal to contained is going to make sure that our button is filled. And the type of submit is going to let our form tag know that whenever we push this button, it needs to trigger the onSubmit function, which is going to trigger the submission. So let's now save this and see what we see in the front end. And we actually encountered a small error because we didn't import the button correctly. It needs to be like this. So we're going to go and make sure that it's import button from m@mui/material/button. And now on the bottom of the screen, we can indeed see that we have the button right there. Now maybe let's put it down a little bit further. and make it full width. So what we can do is we can just go to the button, do sx =, double square brackets, and then say that the width is going to be equal to 100%. And actually it doesn't need to be an equal sign, but it needs to be a colon. And then we can also say that we want to have a slight margin top of, let's say, 10 pixels. Now let's also slightly reduce the margin top that we see here. So this can be around 30, and this one can also be around 30, so that the forms are a little bit closer to each other, so that we see everything on one page, hopefully. And now we can indeed see that we have this to submit the forms. And again, I know that this doesn't look the best, but let's just focus on the functionality for now. So now we can see if we can actually submit something. So currently, if we take a look and we go to the backend, you can see that we have a dark theme, a green theme, and a light theme, which are in my themes database. But what happens if we create something called custom theme? And it's going to be a light theme where the primary color needs to be, let's take a very purple / pinkish, and the secondary color, let's make it very green. Let's see what happens when we click submit. So we actually have not been redirected to the homepage, but let's see if we did post the data. And indeed, you can see that in our database now we have the custom theme. So it did actually post our data, but the logic for redirecting us does not seem to be working that well. And it actually turns out that I made a small typo there. So if we go to the part where we submitted, I've put it as window.location.href and then enclosed it in these round brackets. But actually I'm supposed to be just doing an equal sign and then specify where we want to go. So let's now create another theme. So inside of here, we can call it custom theme number 2. I'm going to make this a light mode again, but now we're going to be picking some orange colors and we're going to be picking some blue colors. And let's submit it and see if we get to another page. Okay, and we now indeed land inside of the home page, so that seems to be working just fine. Now, if we go to our settings page, we should also be able to pick between our new themes. And indeed, we can see that we have the custom theme and the custom theme 2 as the options to set as the active theme. Now, of course, my colors were horrible, but if I do custom theme and I submit, you can now see that we indeed have a very green color and a pink color as the themes. And if I select custom theme 2, you can actually see that it becomes the blue and the orange. So it seems to be working perfectly at the moment. Now, one thing what I would like to do inside of my homepage is have an overview of all of the different themes that we have inside of our application. So let's see how we can do that. Now, first step there is actually getting the themes. Now, we did already fetch themes before, because inside of our settings file, we actually, of course, have the option to pick between all of our active themes. And the way that we do that in our settings file is we have a field called options, and that passes in all of the themes that we have, which are being fetched in our app.jsx file. So all we need to do on our homepage is also create a parameter there. So let's say that I have a parameter on my homepage which is being called themes. And then I can go to my app.jsx file and simply say that it expects something called themes. And then I can just put in the constant in which I store all of the themes that we have already fetched in the previous video. So they're being stored in a constant called themes. So what I can do is say that themes is equal to the themes. And now on the home page, if I say that I want to console.log and say home data and then call this one themes, we should get all of the themes on this page. So now we're on our home page, and if I inspect on the home page and then go to our console, you can see that we have the home data and it has all of the themes. Now I want to replace the content that we currently have in the boxes right here, and those need to be changed, all of the themes that we have. So for each of the themes, I want to have some kind of a card that provides some details. So the way to do that is we can actually get rid of what is right now on our home.jsx file, and we can map over all of the themes that we have. So I'm going to open some squarely brackets, and in there I can say themes.map, and then we do some round brackets, and then some round brackets again. And in this round brackets, I put in theme, And then after that, we do some arrow and some squirrely brackets like this, so that we have all of that stuff complete. And now we can, inside of here, use it to create a box for each of the themes, because for each of the maps, we're going to do something. So I'm going to say that we want to have a box, and in the box itself, I want to have a few things. So I want to have a box that is going to give us the title. So let's place it something like this and say title. Then I would also like to have a box which has simply the primary color. And then also a box that displays the secondary color. And as a last step, I want to have a box which should contain a link. And the link should be to the place where in the future we might edit a theme or where we can see more details. Now, if we go to the actual data, you can see that the name of the theme is inside the name attribute. So we can use that to do something like this, where we say that the title needs to be equal to theme.name. Now, I actually see that we're making a slight mistake here. We actually need to wrap the end result of the map function in round brackets and not in squirrely brackets. So let's make sure that we have it in the round brackets and get rid of this squirrely bracket like so. And then we also need to close it. Also needs to be another round bracket right here. Yes, it should be something like this. So now when we go to the actual result, you will see that we have all of the themes listed here, but it looks a little bit messy. So let's make sure they're a little bit more distinctive. So what I will do is I'm going to be putting in a box before we map over all of the different things. And in that box, we're going to be applying some styling. So we're going to do sx equal to 2 times the square brackets. And the first thing that we can say is that display needs to be equal to flex. And then we can also say that we want to justify content. And that's going to be equal to space evenly. Also in the box, I'm going to place some sx statement in there as well. And we're going to say that box shadow is going to be equal to 3. And I'm going to set the width of the box equal to 20%. So now when we get to the page, you can see that the boxes are spaced evenly, so to say. And also all of the things are structured now a little bit better. But still not quite happy with the end result. So what we can do is we can give these things a little bit of a margin of 15 pixels. And that in this case makes sure that they're spaced a little bit better. And then we can also add a padding, and that is going to make sure that we have some internal spacing so that it's not straight to the edge. So if we set this to 10 pixels, you will notice that if we go here, actually there's a little bit of a distance between the start of this and then this. Now what I also want to do is I want to make the titles of the themes bold, and these primary and the secondary colors, I just want them to be a complete full width bar, which represents the colors of the theme. So to do that, we are going to first go to the box of the title, and in there we do sx and we do equal, and then again some square brackets, and there we can do the font size, and we can set that to bold, and it actually needs to be the font weight and not the font size. So let's save that and go back, and now we can see that it is a little bit better like that. And let's also make sure that we have the colors here. So we can set an sx again and then state that this needs to be equal to a background color. And that background color can then be set to the primary color. And we do that by doing something like this. And then we set it to primary.main. And then what I also want to do is I want to set the total width of this thing to 100% so that we are full width right there. And I'm going to copy this over and put it also in the other box, but there it is going to be the secondary.main. Then we can also say that the height of this color bar, I want it to be around 15 pixels. So let's also put it right here. And actually, I don't really want to see any text because, yeah, whether it's the primary or secondary, it just needs to show kind of what the theme is about. And actually, and now we get back there, but I actually made a slight mistake because I don't want to display the current primary and the secondary color. I want to display the color of the theme. So what we actually need to do here is not do primary.main, but we need to put in something called theme dot primary underscore color, because that should have the color code. And then here we can also refer to theme, but then the secondary color. So secondary underscore color. Let's save that. And now you can see that we get the colors of the respective themes as boxes right there. So this seems to be working just fine. Now to make sure that we can edit these themes, we also need to add some backend functionality. Because right now, if we go to the backend and then to the views, the only thing that we can do is actually list and create items. Now, what we also want to do is we want to make sure that we can retrieve a single item so that we can populate the default value of the form that we want to edit. And also I want to have an update function so that we can update things based on the form. Now update we have already done in a previous video, and we can actually just copy over the entire function for updating and put it in the view set for the themes. And that should be working just fine because our example is quite generic. Now what we need to also add beneath the list is a function for retrieve, because we want to retrieve a single theme that we actually want to edit. So in there we put in the self and then also request, but also a pk because we want to get one singular theme. And in there we can say that our theme is going to be equal to themes.objects.get. And then what we want to get is where the ID or the pk is equal to the pk, because we only want to get the one that we are actually looking for. Then when we say retrieve, we can also say that the serializer is equal to self.serializer underscore class. And the thing that we want to serialize is the data. So we can do the theme in there so that it's going to serialize that. As a last step, we also need to return something, and what we want to return is the response, and the response is going to be the serializer.data. And this will bring a single record to our frontend. Now, also here in the update, we say that we have the active theme, but we actually only have the theme. So we also need to set the model to themes.objects.get. And then let's also serialize the active theme so that we're sure that we don't make a mistake. And let's save that. So now what we want to do in the front end is we want to create a separate page for editing records. Now it's going to be very similar to the page for creating records. So I'm just going to copy and paste that, rename it to edit themes. And let's remove the word of copy. And let's also call this edit theme. And when we go all the way down, we can export edit theme. And now what I want to do is I want to go to the app.jsx file and import the new page we have just created. So import the edit theme, and we can also create a new route, which is not going to be equal to create, but it is actually going to be equal to edit, but it will also expect an ID. So we're also going to do slash and then specify a colon and ID, because we only want to edit a specific theme with a specific ID. And then as the element, we can say that this is going to be the edit theme. So now what I want to do first is make sure that we create a link in these boxes on the homepage that should bring us to the edit page, and it should also provide us with the ID. So what we want to do is go to the home.jsx file, and in there we're going to be changing this box right here, and we're going to specify that we need an A tag. And this A tag simply means a link. Now we need to provide some text in here. So we're going to say link to, and then we're going to pass in the theme name again, so that we can say that it's a link to something. And then we can specify that the href is going to be equal to a link. Now the link actually needs to go to /edit and then the ID. So let's just copy this over so that we have it and go to the home.jsx file and paste it in. But this ID we can pass in through the theme.id field. So we need to get the theme.id inside of this link. So to do that, we can add a $sign right here and then some square brackets. And in there we specify theme.id. Now the thing is, we then also need to change these parentheses to backwards commas, because for some reason that is how they want to have parameters inside of a link. And then we also need to wrap this whole thing inside some square brackets, otherwise it will not understand it. So like this, it should go to our edit page and then take the ID of our theme to go to the right edit page. So let's see what this looks like on our homepage. So we now have these links, and if I click them, we go to our edit page, which currently is exactly the same as our create page. Now what we want to do on this page is we want to fetch the data for the theme that has this ID right here. So the ID that we pass in the link on the top. So we can fetch the actual theme that we want to edit and pass in the default values inside of the constants so that it's already pre-populated. Now, how do we actually do that? Well, we just need to fetch some data from our backend. And we've already done something similar in our app.jsx file. So if we go there, you can see that at a certain point, we have a constant called getData, and this is getting the data from our backend and then using useEffect to trigger the fetching of data. So what I will do is I'm going to copy over the constant of getData in the useEffect, and we're going to place that in our edit themes.jsx file on the top. Now then, we also need some constants in which we're going to store the data that we want to get. So we do a constant, and I'm going to be calling it edit theme and set edit theme. And that is going to be equal again to use state. And by default, that is going to be an empty list. Now, in here, it gets all of the themes because it does themes like this. But what we want to do is use the ID that is inside of the link and pass that into here. So to get the ID from the hyperlink on the edit page, which in our example is going to be 1, we actually need to create a new constant. So we can say that the constant of ID is going to be equal to window.location.pathname, and then we're going to split it based on a character called slash, and then we're going to do .pop. And that will get the ID from our link. And we can check that by doing a console.log and say that we want to log an ID with the value of ID. And I mistyped that, so do console.log. And also on the top here, let's make sure that we also import useEffect, because we did not do that, and that is right there. And now if we get to this page and we refresh it, you can see that ID value is equal to 1. So it gets the correct ID. So what we now want to do is pass this ID into the request that we make for Axios. So we can say that it's themes slash, and then we want to do a $sign and some square brackets and pass in the ID. Now we also want to end on trailing slash because for some reason that is what we do. So let's save that. And then we do not want to store the data in set themes, but in edit themes. So we do set edit theme, and that is where we place the data. So now we can change the console.log. So let's bring that a little bit more down underneath the edit theme. And we can say that edit theme is going to be equal to edit theme. And let's now hope that it brings only the theme that we have selected through the link. And indeed, you can now see that we have the theme with the name, the mode, the primary color, and the secondary color. So now we want to put that information inside of the name and the mode. So now that we've fetched the data successfully, we actually need to pass it to the different constants. Now we already know what to do there because we can just use the set name, set mode, set primary color, and set secondary color to populate the values. So after we set the edit theme to res.data, we can also say that we want to do set name, and we can say that it's equal to res.data.name. And that should set the name of the form to the name that we have in the data. And now when we get back, we indeed see that it pre-populates this form value to dark theme. So that seems to be working just fine. Now we also want to do that for the rest. So we can then say that we have set mode. And set mode is going to be equal to res.data.mode. But we also have then two other ones. So let's copy it over and paste it over. And we have set primary color, which is res.data and then primary underscore color. And it's going to be exactly the same here, but it's going to be equal to secondary color. And then also it's going to be set secondary color. And let's save this. And we now see that we have the exact colors of the theme that we are selecting. So if I go back home and I select the green theme with the yellow and the green, we can go here and it has the exact colors ready for us to change. So we could potentially select different colors like this, but now we need to resubmit this. And that logic is going to be very similar as before. So we go to the submission, but now instead of a .post, we're going to do a .put, because that's simply the way that we need to do it. And we're not going to go to themes, but we also need to provide the unique identifier. But we've already done that on the top here, so we can just copy over the ID thing and put it also right here in the themes. And now it's going to know that it needs to change these values for this ID. And then afterwards, we can go back to the home page. So let's save this and let's see what happens if we edit our green theme. And let's say that we now make it very purple. So we call it our purple theme. And it's going to be purple with a little bit of more purple. And if we now submit it, we go back to our homepage and we see that it now has the purple theme. So this gives us a very nice way of customizing the themes as well. And that is all for this video and this series. In this series, I showed you how you can add themes to your project, but also how you can store that information in your database and even let users create their own themes. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.